Welcome to Historical Legacies. Here, we dive into history's most intriguing stories, unraveling mysteries, and uncovering truths from the past. Subscribe to join our journey through time's greatest moments. Today, we will explore the life of Grigori Rasputin, as he remains one of the most enigmatic figures of early 20th century Russia. A self-proclaimed mystic and healer, he rose from humble beginnings to wield immense influence over the Romanov dynasty. This documentary explores his meteoric rise, controversial role in imperial politics, and the enduring myths surrounding his life and death. Part 1. Humble Beginnings in Siberia. Grigori Rasputin was born on January 21, 1869, in the small, isolated village of Pokrovskoye, located in the vast Siberian wilderness of the Russian Empire. Siberia, known for its harsh winters and expansive landscapes, played a crucial role in shaping Rasputin's character. The son of Efim and Anna Rasputin, peasant farmers, he was one of several siblings. Life in Pokrovskoye was grueling, with poverty, superstition, and religious fervor deeply ingrained in the community. Rasputin's early years were marked by tragedy and hardship. Many of his siblings died young, succumbing to the harsh conditions and illnesses that plagued rural Siberia. These losses likely contributed to Rasputin's spiritual inclinations, as death and suffering were constant reminders of life's fragility. From a young age, he was known for his peculiar personality, often described as intense and magnetic. His piercing blue eyes, which would later become a signature feature, left an impression on those who met him. Unlike many children in Pokrovskoye, Rasputin did not receive a formal education. Illiteracy was common among peasants, and Rasputin was no exception. However, this lack of formal schooling did not hinder his development as a deeply spiritual individual. He spent much of his youth observing the natural world, engaging in prayer, and participating in village rituals. These experiences laid the foundation for his mystical beliefs and connection to spirituality. Rasputin's spiritual awakening reportedly began during his adolescence. Accounts suggest he experienced visions, which he interpreted as signs from God. These visions, combined with his charisma, began to set him apart from his peers. As a young man, Rasputin struggled to find his place in society. He married Praskovia Dubrovina in 1887, and the couple had several children. While he initially attempted to live a traditional life as a farmer, his restless spirit led him to seek something greater. By the late 1890s, Rasputin's life took a dramatic turn. Inspired by his visions, he left his family to embark on a spiritual journey. Pilgrimages to monasteries and holy sites became central to his life as he sought divine guidance. This period of wandering transformed Rasputin from a simple villager into a self-proclaimed holy man. While his decision to leave his family was controversial, it underscored his commitment to his spiritual calling. Rasputin's early life is a story of resilience and transformation. From the frozen fields of Siberia, he began a journey that would ultimately bring him into the heart of Russia's imperial court. The hardships he faced in Pokrovskoye instilled in him a unique blend of determination, faith, and mysticism. These qualities would later define his rise to power and influence. Part 2. Spiritual Awakening and Pilgrimages. Grigori Rasputin's spiritual awakening marked a pivotal moment in his life, setting him on the path from a humble Siberian peasant to a figure of immense influence. His journey began in the late 1890s, following a period of personal turmoil and inner reflection. Rasputin's visions, which he believed were divine revelations, became increasingly vivid and compelling. These experiences convinced him that he was destined for a higher purpose. Leaving behind his family in Pokrovskoye, Rasputin set out on a series of pilgrimages that would shape his identity as a mystic. Pilgrimages were a common expression of faith in Orthodox Christianity, and Rasputin embraced them wholeheartedly. He traveled on foot to some of Russia's most revered holy sites, including monasteries in Verkhoturye and Kazan. These journeys were arduous, often involving weeks of travel through treacherous terrain. Along the way, Rasputin gained a reputation for his unwavering devotion and unorthodox practices. Unlike traditional monks, he rejected rigid asceticism, instead emphasizing a deeply personal and emotional connection to God. One of Rasputin's most transformative experiences occurred during his time at the monastery of Verkhachori. Here, he encountered influential spiritual figures who introduced him to hesychasm, a mystical tradition emphasizing prayer and inner stillness. While he never formally became a monk, Rasputin adopted elements of this practice, blending it with his unique interpretations of faith. His approach to spirituality was deeply unconventional, rejecting institutional authority in favor of direct communion with the divine. Rasputin's charisma and healing reputation began to attract followers during this period. Villagers and travelers who encountered him were often captivated by his piercing gaze and impassioned sermons. Stories of his ability to heal the sick and provide spiritual guidance spread, gradually enhancing his mystique. However, his growing popularity also drew criticism from more orthodox religious leaders. They viewed his practices as heretical and accused him of exploiting the faith of the common people. Despite these controversies, Rasputin's pilgrimages continued to expand his influence. His travels eventually took him beyond the borders of Siberia, reaching as far as Mount Athos in Greece, a center of Orthodox monasticism. This exposure to diverse religious traditions further shaped his spiritual worldview. He developed a belief in the redemptive power of sin, arguing that one must first experience sin to truly understand forgiveness. This provocative idea would later become a hallmark of his teachings and contribute to his notoriety. By the early 1900s, Rasputin had returned to Pokrovskoye, now a changed man. His experiences on the road had transformed him from a simple farmer into a self-styled holy man with a growing following. His reputation as a healer and spiritual guide began to spread beyond his village, reaching the ears of influential figures in St. Petersburg. This marked the beginning of his ascent into the highest echelons of Russian society. Rasputin's spiritual awakening and pilgrimages were the foundation of his rise to power. They allowed him to craft a unique identity that resonated with both the peasantry and the aristocracy. These journeys not only deepened his faith, but also prepared him for the immense challenges and controversies that awaited him. Part 3. Arrival in St. Petersburg. Grigori Rasputin's arrival in St. Petersburg in 1903 marked the beginning of his transformation from a wandering mystic to one of the most influential figures in Imperial Russia. The bustling capital of the Russian Empire was a stark contrast to the quiet Siberian village of Pokrovsk. St. Petersburg, with its grand palaces, cultural vibrancy, and political intrigue, was the center of power and ambition. Rasputin's arrival in this cosmopolitan city would forever change his life and the fate of the Romanovs. At the time, St. Petersburg was deeply troubled by political unrest and societal anxiety. The Russian Empire was grappling with a rise of revolutionary movements, widespread poverty, and dissatisfaction among the working class. Within this environment, many in the aristocracy turned to mysticism and spiritualism as a means of coping with their fears. Rasputin, with his reputation as a healer and holy man, arrived at precisely the right moment to capitalize on this cultural phenomenon. His charisma, piercing blue eyes, and unorthodox approach to spirituality made him an intriguing figure among the elite. Rasputin's entry into high society was facilitated by influential connections. He was introduced to prominent members of the clergy and aristocracy who were drawn to his mystical reputation. One of his key patrons was Bishop Theophan, an influential figure in the Russian Orthodox Church. Theophan, impressed by Rasputin's apparent healing abilities and spiritual insights, introduced him to the royal court. This endorsement lent Rasputin a degree of legitimacy and opened doors that would have otherwise been closed to a Siberian peasant. The turning point came in 1905 when Rasputin was presented to Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra. The Romanovs, desperate for a cure for their hemophiliac son, Alexei, were drawn to Rasputin's reputation as a healer. During his initial meeting with the imperial family, Rasputin reportedly prayed over Alexei and calmed his symptoms. Whether through divine intervention, coincidence, or sheer charisma, Rasputin earned the trust of the Romanovs. This trust would solidify his place within the royal inner circle and grant him unprecedented influence. Despite his growing prominence, Rasputin's arrival in St. Petersburg was not without controversy. His unkempt appearance, rural manners, and unconventional behavior clashed with the refined sensibilities of the city's elite. Many viewed him with suspicion, dismissing him as a fraud or opportunist. Yet, Rasputin's ability to navigate these criticisms and ingratiate himself with powerful allies was a testament to his cunning and adaptability. His charm and spiritual rhetoric resonated deeply with those who sought solace in turbulent times. Rasputin's presence in St. Petersburg also fueled rumors and intrigue. Stories of his miraculous healing abilities and alleged prophetic powers began to circulate widely. Some claimed he could foresee the future, while others insisted he was merely a manipulative charlatan. Regardless of these differing opinions, Rasputin's reputation continued to grow. His enigmatic nature made him a subject of fascination and gossip, both in the capital and across the empire. By 1906, Rasputin had firmly established himself as a key figure in St. Petersburg's religious and social circles. His meteoric rise from a wandering Siberian mystic to an advisor to the imperial family was nothing short of extraordinary. This period marked the beginning of his deep entanglement in Russia's political and social affairs, setting the stage for both his influence and eventual downfall. Part 4. The Romanov Connection. Rasputin's introduction to the Romanov family in 1905 was a defining moment in his life and a turning point in the history of the Russian Empire. Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra, facing personal and political crises, saw Rasputin as a beacon of hope. Their youngest son, Alexei, suffered from hemophilia, a life-threatening condition that left the imperial couple desperate for a cure. Doctors could offer little relief, and Alexandra, a deeply religious woman, believed divine intervention was their only hope. Rasputin's arrival at court seemed almost miraculous in its timing. The first meeting between Rasputin and the Romanovs took place at Tsarskoye Selo, the imperial residence. Accounts suggest that Rasputin immediately made an impression with his calm demeanor and penetrating gaze. When Alexei suffered a severe bleeding episode, Rasputin reportedly prayed over the boy and calmed both his symptoms and the frantic parents. While the exact reasons for Alexei's improvement remain a matter of debate, Alexandra became convinced that Rasputin possessed divine healing powers. This belief would cement his role in the Romanov household. Over time, Rasputin's influence on the Tsarina grew stronger. Alexandra, deeply devoted to her son, viewed Rasputin as a savior sent by God. She believed his presence was essential for Alexei's survival, a conviction that led her to fiercely protect Rasputin from his detractors. Rasputin, in turn, exploited this trust to secure his position within the royal court. His relationship with Alexandra, though entirely platonic, fueled rumors of impropriety that would later contribute to his infamy. Nicholas II also developed a degree of trust in Rasputin, albeit less fervently than his wife. The Tsar, a reserved and indecisive leader, appreciated Rasputin's unwavering confidence and straightforward advice. However, many in the court viewed Rasputin as a dangerous outsider. His rural background, coarse manners, and unorthodox religious practices clashed with the aristocracy's refined sensibilities. As his influence grew, so did the resentment among the nobility and clergy. Despite the growing opposition, Rasputin's relationship with the Romanovs continued to deepen. He became a regular visitor to the imperial palace, where he advised the family on spiritual matters and offered counsel on political issues. His influence extended beyond the personal realm, as Alexandra increasingly sought his advice on state affairs during Nicholas's absences. This dynamic would have far-reaching consequences, as Rasputin's involvement in politics alienated key figures in the government and military. Criticism of Rasputin reached new heights as rumors of his influence spread. Nobles, clergy, and even members of the royal family accused him of manipulating the Tsarina and meddling in state affairs. Some claimed he used hypnosis or black magic to control Alexandra, while others portrayed him as a sexual predator preying on the court's women. These accusations, though often baseless, reflected the deep unease surrounding Rasputin's role in the Romanov inner circle. For Alexandra, however, none of these accusations mattered. Her unwavering belief in Rasputin's divine mission made her blind to his faults and deaf to the criticisms of others. This unshakable loyalty only deepened the rift between the Romanovs and the Russian aristocracy, further isolating the imperial family at a time when public support was already waning. By 1910, Rasputin had become an indispensable figure in the Romanov household. His connection to the family, rooted in Alexandra's belief in his ability to protect Alexei, would define his rise and ultimate fall. The Romanov connection, while granting him immense power, also painted a target on his back, as his enemies sought to sever his ties to the throne. Part 5. Influence on the Tsarina. As Rasputin's influence grew within the Romanov household, it became increasingly evident that Tsarina Alexandra was his most fervent and unwavering supporter. Her deep devotion to her son, Alexei, played a crucial role in shaping her perception of Rasputin. She viewed him not merely as a healer, but as a spiritual savior sent by God to protect her family, particularly her son, who faced the constant threat of bleeding episodes due to his hemophilia. The Tsarina's belief in Rasputin's powers bordered on obsession. She considered him a divine instrument, capable of providing guidance, healing, and protection that no one else could offer. His presence in her life brought a sense of comfort and security, especially when medical professionals failed to alleviate Alexei's suffering. In her eyes, Rasputin was more than just a mystic. He was a man chosen by God to safeguard her son's fragile life. Alexandra's reliance on Rasputin was not just personal, but also political. The Tsarina, who was already isolated from the Russian aristocracy and often distrusted by the court, found in Rasputin an ally who stood unwaveringly by her side. While her husband, Tsar Nicholas II, was often indecisive and absent due to his duties at the front during World War I, Alexandra turned to Rasputin for advice on state matters. He was consulted on everything from the appointment of ministers to the handling of the war effort. Rasputin's counsel was deeply rooted in his spiritual beliefs, which often clashed with the political realities of the time. His guidance, although unconventional, carried weight with Alexandra, who believed his insights were divinely inspired. She increasingly relied on him to make decisions that, in her view, were in the best interest of her family and the Russian Empire. This growing influence over political matters made Rasputin a deeply polarizing figure within Russian society. Many in the Russian elite viewed Rasputin's power over the Tsarina with disdain. They saw him as a dangerous figure, manipulating Alexandra for his own benefit and undermining the monarchy's credibility. The clergy, in particular, were alarmed by the close relationship between Rasputin and the Tsarina, believing that a man of such questionable morals had no place in the royal court. Rumors of Rasputin's interference in political affairs and his alleged debauchery only fueled the growing animosity towards him. Despite the mounting opposition, Alexandra's blind trust in Rasputin only strengthened. She refused to believe the growing rumors about his character, dismissing them as jealous gossip from those who envied his closeness to the royal family. Rasputin, in turn, reveled in his position of power, often making bold decisions that further solidified his status as an influential figure in the imperial court. His advice to the Tsarina was often disregarded by others, but she remained steadfast in her belief that his guidance was divinely inspired. This unshakable bond between Rasputin and Alexandra, which seemed almost spiritual in nature, would become one of the most defining aspects of Rasputin's life. It placed him at the center of the Romanov dynasty's inner workings, giving him access to the heart of the Russian Empire's political and personal affairs. His influence over the Tsarina, while securing his place in the royal court, also made him a lightning rod for criticism and conspiracy. As Rasputin's power grew, so did the fear and resentment of those around him. His ability to sway the Tsarina's decisions, even in the face of mounting opposition, ensured that his place in the imperial household was secure for the time being. Yet, this very influence would sow the seeds of his eventual downfall. Part 6. Scandals and Controversy. As Rasputin's influence over the Russian court deepened, so too did the rumors and scandals surrounding his name. His rise from a Siberian peasant to a close confidant of the Romanovs was astonishing, but was also fraught with controversy. The very nature of his power, gained through spiritual influence rather than traditional political or royal means, made him an easy target for detractors. Whispers about his behavior and alleged impropriety began to spread through both the elite circles of St. Petersburg and the general populace. One of the most enduring scandals surrounding Rasputin involved his supposed relationships with women. While he was often described as a charismatic and attractive figure, his reported promiscuity became a focal point for critics. Tales of Rasputin's sexual exploits, some true and others exaggerated, were eagerly shared and embellished by those seeking to discredit him. He was accused of having affairs with numerous women, including members of the aristocracy and even those connected to the royal family. These allegations were amplified by Rasputin's unusual ability to move in and out of the highest circles of Russian society with apparent ease. His rural background and rough manners, when juxtaposed with his proximity to the royal family, fueled gossip and suspicion. Many members of the nobility viewed him as an unrefined interloper, whose moral shortcomings were as troubling as his growing influence. The stories of Rasputin's alleged sexual exploits were so widely believed that they became an indelible part of his public image. However, the true nature of Rasputin's relationships with women remains a subject of debate. Some biographers suggest that much of the scandalous gossip was invented or exaggerated by his enemies in an effort to tarnish his reputation. His close relationship with the Tsarina and her growing dependence on him made him a target for those who sought to weaken the monarchy's authority. Nevertheless, the rumors continued to persist, leaving a stain on his public image that was difficult to erase. Aside from his alleged sexual affairs, Rasputin's behavior in public and at court was also a source of scandal. He was known for his crude and unruly conduct, often disregarding the decorum expected of someone in his position. Rasputin's disheveled appearance, coarse language, and unpredictable actions were deeply unsettling to the aristocracy, who valued elegance and sophistication. These behaviors were often seen as a reflection of his alleged lack of refinement and unholy character, further alienating him from the elite of Russian society. Despite these controversies, Rasputin's influence over the Tsarina remained largely unaffected. Alexandra's unwavering belief in his divine role made her blind to the accusations and rumors circulating around him. She fiercely defended Rasputin, even as the whispers of his impropriety grew louder. In her eyes, his spiritual powers were the key to Alexei's survival, and no scandal could sway her conviction. This steadfast loyalty only deepened the gulf between the royal family and the aristocracy, further isolating the Romanovs from the very people who could have offered them support. Rasputin's enemies within the Russian court grew more vocal as his influence expanded. Many in the nobility and clergy saw him as a corrupting force on the imperial family, leading to increasing calls for his removal. The whispers and rumors about his behavior, combined with his unorthodox spiritual practices, made him a lightning rod for opposition. Rasputin's name was now synonymous with scandal, and this growing controversy would ultimately become one of the key factors in his downfall. Despite all of this, Rasputin continued to thrive at the heart of the Romanov family. His scandals only seemed to make him more powerful in the eyes of Alexandra, who saw his survival as proof of his divine purpose. However, as the political and social environment in Russia became more volatile, the royal family's connection to Rasputin would become increasingly difficult to defend. The mounting scandals surrounding him would soon play a crucial role in the events that would lead to his tragic demise. Part 7. Rasputin and the War Effort. As World War I raged across Europe, the Russian Empire found itself increasingly caught in the chaos of the conflict. Tsar Nicholas II, now directly overseeing the Russian military, was faced with a series of military setbacks and rising domestic unrest. The war placed immense pressure on the Russian monarchy, and the Tsar, already struggling with his leadership, found himself relying more heavily on his wife, Tsarina Alexandra, for guidance. Rasputin's influence, already deeply entrenched in the Romanov family, began to extend into the realm of politics, particularly with regard to the war effort. With Nicholas at the front lines, it was Alexandra who took up the reins of the Russian Empire, and she turned to Rasputin for advice on a wide range of matters. His presence at the imperial court became increasingly important as he began offering counsel on war strategies, military appointments, and the handling of the Russian economy. Rasputin's lack of formal political experience did not deter the Tsarina from seeking his advice, and he reportedly had an influential role in shaping some of the decisions she made. Many in the Russian court, as well as political and military leaders, were horrified by Rasputin's growing involvement in state matters. The aristocracy, military officials, and the clergy began to view him as an outsider, unqualified to advise on such critical matters. The Tsarina's reliance on Rasputin in the face of Russia's military struggles created a rift between the imperial family and their allies in the government. Rasputin's influence over the war effort grew during the course of the conflict. His ability to recommend key figures for military positions and his advice on domestic policies were seen by some as a sign of his power. However, many Russian officials believed that his involvement was damaging, exacerbating the country's military failures and undermining the morale of the troops. Among the most controversial aspects of Rasputin's role in the war effort were his alleged interference in military appointments. Several high-ranking officers were removed from their posts following Rasputin's advice, and new, often less qualified individuals were brought in. This practice led to widespread discontent in the Russian military, where Rasputin's influence was seen as detrimental to the war effort. Some believed that his recommendations were based on his personal relationships with individuals rather than their qualifications or military experience. The dissatisfaction with Rasputin's involvement was not limited to the military. Many of the Russian people, already weary from years of conflict and hardship, saw Rasputin as a symbol of the imperial family's incompetence. As food shortages, high inflation, and the constant death toll from the front lines took their toll, the Tsar and Tsarina's reliance on Rasputin became increasingly unpopular. Rasputin was painted as a figure who contributed to the nation's misery rather than alleviating it. Despite this growing opposition, Rasputin remained a steadfast advisor to the Tsarina. He continued to provide counsel, even as the tide of war seemed to turn against Russia. His advice often reflected his unorthodox spiritual beliefs, which led him to suggest actions that appeared disconnected from the harsh realities of the war. For example, Rasputin is said to have recommended to Alexandra that the Russian soldiers pray and have faith in divine intervention, rather than pursue more practical strategies for winning the war. Rasputin's influence during this period did little to ease the mounting discontent within Russia. His involvement in the war effort, along with his scandalous reputation, became a source of tension between the monarchy and the Russian populace. This set the stage for the eventual collapse of the Romanov dynasty, as Rasputin's role in the imperial court and his involvement in state matters became increasingly untenable. Part 8. The Road to Ruin. By 1916, Rasputin's influence over the Romanov family had reached its peak, but so had the animosity surrounding him. His unorthodox role in Russian politics, his deep involvement in the royal family's personal affairs, and the numerous scandals that followed him began to take a severe toll on his reputation. The Russian Empire, already struggling with the strains of World War I, was becoming increasingly disillusioned with the royal family's leadership and Rasputin's growing influence. The discontent reached a boiling point, and a series of events would set Rasputin on the path to his inevitable downfall. The Russian aristocracy and political elite, alarmed by Rasputin's power and the Tsarina's blind loyalty to him, began plotting his removal. Prominent figures, including Prince Felix Yusupov, a member of one of Russia's wealthiest families, were particularly vocal in their disdain for Rasputin. These figures saw him as a destabilizing force, someone who was not only corrupting the royal family, but also contributing to the empire's decline. As the war dragged on, and Russian society became more frustrated with the royal family's leadership, the idea of removing Rasputin became an increasingly attractive option to those who sought to restore the monarchy's credibility. The conspiracy to kill Rasputin took shape over several months in 1916. Prince Yusupov, along with other nobles, including Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich and right-wing politician Vladimir Purishkevich, developed a plan to eliminate the mystic. They believed that by removing Rasputin, they could weaken the Tsarina's influence and potentially steer the monarchy away from the dire path it was on. The conspirators, despite their noble status, were driven by their fear that Rasputin's influence was leading Russia to ruin. On the night of December 29, 1916, Rasputin was lured to Yusupov's palace under the pretense of a meeting with the prince. Rasputin was offered cyanide lace cakes and wine, but after consuming the poison, he appeared unfazed, much to the shock of the conspirators. They tried to shoot him, but Rasputin seemingly survived every attempt, leaving his assassins in disbelief. Finally, Yusupov shot Rasputin again, and this time, Rasputin collapsed and died. The strange nature of his death, surviving poison and gunshots, only added to the mystique surrounding him, ensuring that his legend would endure long after his physical demise. The murder of Rasputin was met with mixed reactions across Russia. Many in the royal court believed that his death would restore the dignity and honor of the monarchy. However, the Tsarina's grief and the chaos that followed Rasputin's death highlighted the deep divisions within the royal family and the empire as a whole. The assassination only further alienated the Romanovs from their people, and Rasputin's death marked the beginning of the end for the Romanov dynasty. Rasputin's demise was emblematic of the larger political and social turmoil that gripped Russia in the years leading up to the revolution. The deepening resentment toward the monarchy and Rasputin's influence created a volatile atmosphere that would ultimately lead to the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II in 1917. In many ways, Rasputin's life and death symbolized the collapse of an empire that had once seemed unshakable. His assassination, along with the events that followed, sealed the fate of the Romanov family and set the stage for the revolution that would change the course of Russian history forever. Part 9. The aftermath of Rasputin's death. Rasputin's death did little to end the turmoil surrounding his name or the Romanov family. The assassination itself was shrouded in mystery and became the subject of rumors and conspiracy theories. While the immediate reaction to Rasputin's death was one of shock among the royal family, the long-term effects were more profound, as his murder was a symbol of the unraveling of the monarchy. The murder, violent and chaotic, marked a turning point, not only in the life of the Romanovs, but in the fate of Russia itself. After Rasputin's assassination, Tsarina Alexandra was deeply devastated. She mourned his loss as though he were a close family member, convinced that Rasputin's death would lead to the downfall of her son's health and the stability of the Russian Empire. Her unwavering loyalty to the mystic had clouded her judgment for so long that she now found herself grappling with the collapse of the only relationship she felt could protect her family. Rasputin's absence left an unfillable void in her life, and her grief only further isolated her from the Russian people and court. Despite his death, Rasputin's influence continued to cast a long shadow over the Romanovs. Tsarina Alexandra remained emotionally distraught, and the imperial court, still filled with anger over his role in state affairs, could not escape the ripple effects of his legacy. The Russian public, already disillusioned with the royal family's leadership during the war, saw Rasputin's death as too little, too late. His murder did nothing to alleviate the growing frustrations with Tsar Nicholas II's leadership, nor did it restore faith in the monarchy. In the weeks and months following Rasputin's assassination, the imperial family became increasingly isolated. The Russian people, who had been deeply divided over Rasputin's influence, now found themselves growing more restless. The political elite, military officials, and workers began to see the death of Rasputin as a symptom of a larger problem. Russia's leadership had become inept and unprepared to address the country's challenges. Meanwhile, the aristocracy and the clergy, who had resented Rasputin's interference in royal affairs, were left without a unifying figure to rally behind. Rasputin's murder also triggered a flurry of conspiracy theories, some of which suggested that his death had been orchestrated not just by a few nobles, but by a larger political conspiracy. Stories about the bizarre circumstances of his death, surviving poison and multiple gunshots, fueled suspicions that his assassination was part of a grand plot to destabilize the monarchy. Some even claimed that Rasputin had been involved in secretive political machinations, or that his death was part of a darker, more complex scheme to weaken the Romanovs. These theories contributed to the mystique of Rasputin, ensuring that he would remain a subject of fascination for decades to come. However, despite the intrigue surrounding his death, the real consequences of Rasputin's murder were felt in the political sphere. The Romanovs' grip on power continued to weaken as the Russian Revolution of 1917 drew closer. The abdication of Tsar Nicholas II just months after Rasputin's death marked the definitive end of the Romanov dynasty. Rasputin's death, while a short-term solution for some, did nothing to stop the inevitable collapse of the Russian Empire. His life, death, and the growing unrest within Russia served as harbingers of the revolutionary forces that were soon to engulf the entire country. Part 10. The Legacy of Rasputin. Rasputin's death did not bring an end to his story. Rather, it cemented his place as one of history's most enigmatic and controversial figures. Despite his assassination, his influence over Russian history continued to linger long after the fall of the Romanovs. The mystery surrounding his rise to power, his controversial role in the royal family, and the circumstances of his death ensured that Rasputin's legacy would be shaped by both myth and fact. In the years following Rasputin's death, his name became synonymous with corruption, mysticism, and scandal. His life story, an uneducated peasant who rose to influence at the heart of the Russian Empire, was seen by many as an embodiment of the moral decay of the Romanov dynasty. Rasputin's connection to the royal family, especially his deep influence over Tsarina Alexandra, was widely regarded as one of the key factors in the monarchy's eventual downfall. As the Russian Revolution unfolded and the Romanovs were overthrown, Rasputin's legacy was exploited by revolutionaries and anti-monarchists as a symbol of the empire's excesses. The Bolshevik leadership used Rasputin's name and story to galvanize public sentiment against the monarchy, portraying him as a corrupt outsider who symbolized everything wrong with the imperial system. His close relationship with the Tsarina and his involvement in state affairs became a potent tool for propaganda, casting Rasputin as a villain who personified the incompetence and decadence of the ruling class. However, beyond the political ramifications, Rasputin's legacy also took on a more mystical and mythic dimension. His supposed spiritual powers, the strange nature of his death, and the enduring rumors about his influence gave birth to a series of legends and myths that persist to this day. Some view Rasputin as a charlatan, while others continue to believe in the more supernatural aspects of his persona. His reputation as a mystic who could heal and offer prophetic advice created an enduring fascination with the man, even long after the fall of the Russian Empire. Rasputin's image was further immortalized in popular culture, where he has been depicted in films, books, and even music. His mysterious persona, combined with the controversies surrounding his life and death, made him a subject of enduring interest for generations. In some portrayals, he is depicted as a tragic figure, misunderstood and ultimately destroyed by the very people who once embraced him. In others, he is portrayed as a villain, a manipulative force who contributed to the downfall of the Romanovs. The mystique surrounding Rasputin has also extended beyond Russia. His influence in the Russian Empire and his connections to the royal family made him a subject of fascination in the West. He became an icon of Russian mysticism, a symbol of the collapse of an empire, and a figure whose life story continues to intrigue people around the world. Despite the various interpretations of Rasputin's legacy, one thing is clear. His life remains a fascinating and complex narrative that defies easy categorization. Whether viewed as a healer, a manipulator, a mystic, or a political advisor, Rasputin's legacy continues to captivate the imagination of those who study the history of the Russian Empire. His story is an indelible part of the larger tale of the fall of the Romanov dynasty and the tumultuous period that led to the Russian Revolution. Rasputin, in his strange and contradictory existence, remains a symbol of the complexities and contradictions of the empire he once served. Part 11. Rasputin in popular culture. Rasputin's name continues to resonate across the globe, not only within the historical context of the Russian Empire, but also within modern popular culture. His controversial life and dramatic rise to power have made him an enduring figure in literature, film, music, and art. Despite the varying depictions, one constant remains. Rasputin's life is always portrayed as shrouded in mystery and intrigue. He has become a symbol of the supernatural, a figure whose enigmatic personality and controversial death have ensured his place in the collective imagination. One of the most well-known and enduring portrayals of Rasputin is in cinema. He has been featured in numerous films, documentaries, and television shows, often as a larger-than-life figure with both sinister and charismatic qualities. These portrayals tend to emphasize his mysticism, his influence over the royal family, and his role in the downfall of the Romanovs. Rasputin is frequently depicted as a villain, manipulating the royal family for his personal gain, often with a supernatural air that elevates his character beyond that of a mere political advisor. In addition to films, Rasputin has also been immortalized in literature. His life story has inspired countless novels, biographies, and historical works that delve into his rise to power and his controversial actions. These works often explore the psychological and spiritual aspects of his character, offering interpretations of Rasputin that blend fact with fiction. Some authors have portrayed him as a tragic figure, while others have presented him as a manipulative charlatan or even a messianic figure with divine powers. These varied depictions contribute to the legend of Rasputin, turning him into a multifaceted character whose true nature is open to interpretation. Beyond books and films, Rasputin's influence has also been felt in music. The most famous example is the song Rasputin by the German band Boney M, which became a hit in the 1970s. The song, while not historically accurate, portrays Rasputin as a charismatic and powerful figure who held sway over the Russian royal family. With its catchy beat and dramatic lyrics, the song helped to solidify Rasputin's place in modern popular culture, making him a figure that people outside of Russia could recognize and remember. Rasputin's role in popular culture has also extended to visual art. He has been the subject of numerous paintings, posters, and other artistic representations, often emphasizing his mysterious and larger-than-life persona. Artists have used his image to explore themes of power, corruption, and mysticism, presenting Rasputin as both a man of the people and a figure of spiritual authority. His disheveled appearance, combined with his charismatic presence, has made him a compelling subject for visual storytelling. Despite these portrayals, the real Rasputin remains elusive, and the gap between the legend and the man continues to fuel interest in his story. The fascination with Rasputin is not just about his role in history, but about the possibility that there is something extraordinary about him, something that has not been fully understood or explained. This uncertainty and intrigue have made him a lasting figure in popular culture, where he is seen not only as a political manipulator, but as a symbol of the unexplained, the mystical, and the unknown. In many ways, Rasputin's legacy in popular culture reflects the complexities of his real life. He was a man who defied easy categorization, someone who seemed to transcend the ordinary boundaries of his time. Whether depicted as a villain, a spiritual leader, or a tragic figure, Rasputin's place in culture endures because of the contradictions and mysteries that continue to surround his life and death. His legacy, shaped by both historical fact and myth, will likely continue to evolve as new generations seek to understand the man behind the legend. Part 12. Rasputin's impact on Russian history. Rasputin's influence on Russian history cannot be understated, as his presence at the imperial court played a crucial role in the events that led to the downfall of the Romanovs. His rise from a humble peasant to a trusted confidant of the royal family marked a profound shift in the power dynamics of the Russian Empire. Rasputin's involvement with Tsarina Alexandra, particularly in relation to her son's hemophilia, became a focal point of his influence, shaping the monarchy's decisions and ultimately contributing to the erosion of public trust in the Romanovs. In the context of World War I, Rasputin's role became even more pronounced. As the Tsar went to the front lines to lead the Russian military, Alexandra relied heavily on Rasputin's counsel to govern the empire. His influence extended to matters of state, including military appointments, domestic policies, and even the handling of Russia's economy. Many of Rasputin's decisions were viewed with increasing skepticism by the Russian elites, who saw him as an unqualified outsider meddling in matters they believed should be left to experienced officials. Rasputin's connection to the Tsarina deepened, and as the war intensified, his role in advising her became more controversial. His presence at the royal court angered many, including political figures and military leaders, who felt that his influence was detrimental to Russia's interests. The growing resentment toward Rasputin was further fueled by his involvement in high-level appointments, some of which were seen as based more on personal relationships than on merit. His influence in the royal family, particularly with Alexandra, became a symbol of the monarchy's inability to adapt to the rapidly changing political and social landscape of early 20th century Russia. Public opinion of the Romanovs continued to sour as Rasputin's role in governance became increasingly evident. As Russia struggled to maintain its standing in the war, the monarchy's inability to secure victories on the battlefield contributed to the public's growing sense of disillusionment. Rasputin's involvement in the war effort and his advice to the Tsarina were seen by many as part of the reason for Russia's military failures. This sense of incompetence, coupled with the scandals surrounding Rasputin's personal life, made the imperial family appear out of touch with the reality of the suffering faced by ordinary Russians. Rasputin's legacy, therefore, is deeply intertwined with the fall of the Romanovs and the Russian Revolution. His presence at the royal court helped to alienate the monarchy from its people, and his death, while seen as an end to his personal influence, did little to reverse the damage done to the Romanovs' reputation. The eventual abdication of Tsar Nicholas II in 1917 and the subsequent execution of the royal family sealed the fate of the Russian Empire, and Rasputin's role in the broader narrative of imperial collapse cannot be ignored. In the larger context of Russian history, Rasputin is remembered as a figure who symbolized the monarchy's decadence, inefficiency, and inability to address the needs of the people. He was a man who, despite his humble origins, was able to exert extraordinary influence over the highest echelons of power. But in the end, his story is one of tragedy, as his involvement in the affairs of the royal family ultimately contributed to the dynasty's downfall. His life and death serve as a reminder of the complexities of power, influence, and the forces that shape history. Part 13. The Final Days of the Romanovs. The fall of the Romanov dynasty was an inevitable consequence of years of instability and public dissatisfaction, but Rasputin's influence played a significant role in accelerating disillusionment with the monarchy. By the time Tsar Nicholas II and his family were imprisoned in 1917, Russia was in the midst of one of the most turbulent periods in its history. The abdication of the Tsar came after the February Revolution, which led to the establishment of a provisional government. But even after the Tsar's abdication, the fate of the royal family remained uncertain, with many still uncertain of their final outcome. In the months following Nicholas II's abdication, the royal family was placed under house arrest at the Alexander Palace. The Russian people, once loyal to the monarchy, were now deeply divided, with some still hoping for the return of the Romanovs, while others saw their continued existence as a threat to the new government. The Romanovs were moved to Ekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains in 1918, a decision that would ultimately seal their fate. While there, they were kept under tight surveillance, with limited contact with the outside world. In the summer of 1918, the Bolshevik leadership, now in control of Russia, decided that the Romanovs could no longer be allowed to live. The royal family, already struggling with the loss of their status and power, was now deemed a liability to the revolution. The Bolsheviks feared that if they were allowed to survive, the Romanovs could become a rallying point for anti-revolutionary forces, potentially leading to a royalist uprising. On the night of July 16, 1918, the Romanovs were awakened in their house arrest and told they were being moved for their safety. Instead, they were taken to the basement of the house, where they were executed by a firing squad. The Romanov family, including Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, their 5 children, and their servants, were all killed in cold blood. Despite the tragic and violent end to the Romanovs, the execution did not immediately quell the unrest in Russia. Rasputin's death, just a year earlier, may have symbolized the collapse of the old order, but it was the execution of the Romanovs that truly marked the end of the Russian Empire. The royal family's brutal demise is often seen as the final act in the drama of Imperial Russia's collapse, a culmination of decades of mismanagement, corruption, and political ineptitude. The Bolsheviks, led by figures like Lenin and Trotsky, used the death of the Romanovs to solidify their hold on power and move the country away from the old imperial system. Despite the violent end to the Romanovs, the legacy of the Russian monarchy endured in some ways. The execution of the royal family and the collapse of the empire set the stage for the rise of the Soviet Union, but the Romanovs continued to hold a place in the hearts and minds of many Russians, even after their deaths. The image of the royal family, once seen as symbols of divine right and imperial grandeur, was transformed into one of martyrdom and tragedy. The final days of the Romanovs marked the end of an era in Russian history, and Rasputin's legacy, one of mysticism, manipulation, and political influence, was intertwined with their downfall. The story of Rasputin and the Romanovs serves as a stark reminder of how the tides of history can shift dramatically, and how those at the highest echelons of power can, in an instant, be brought low. Part 14. The Romanovs' Legacy in Russia Today. The fall of the Romanov dynasty and the subsequent execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his family left a profound mark on Russian history, and their legacy continues to influence the country even in the present day. The collapse of the monarchy in 1917 and the rise of the Soviet Union created a stark contrast between the old imperial order and the new socialist regime. However, as Russia moved away from its czarist past, the memory of the Romanovs lingered, both as a symbol of the past and as a point of national reflection. In the years following the Bolshevik Revolution, the Romanov family was largely erased from public memory, as the Soviet Union sought to distance itself from the monarchy. Tsar Nicholas II and his family were officially condemned by the state, with their images removed from public spaces, and their history rewritten to reflect the ideals of the new socialist state. Despite this, the story of the Romanovs continued to resonate with certain segments of the Russian population, who saw the royal family as martyrs and symbols of a bygone era. The process of rehabilitating the Romanovs began in the late 20th century, particularly with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. The dissolution of the USSR allowed for a renewed interest in Russia's imperial past, and many Russians began to reassess the legacy of the Romanovs. The Russian Orthodox Church, which had long been critical of the Tsarist regime, also began to acknowledge the family as martyrs, leading to their eventual canonization in 2000. This move was part of a broader effort to restore Russia's spiritual connection to its pre-Soviet past and to heal the wounds left by decades of communist rule. Despite this rehabilitation, the legacy of the Romanovs remains a complex and contested issue in Russia today. For some, the Romanovs represent an idealized version of Russian history, a time of imperial grandeur and divine rule. For others, the monarchy symbolizes the excesses, corruption, and failure that contributed to the collapse of the empire and the suffering of ordinary Russians. The debate over the Romanovs' legacy is a reflection of the ongoing tension in Russia between its imperial past and its Soviet heritage, and it remains a source of political and cultural discourse. The burial of the Romanovs in 1998 marked another significant moment in the family's legacy. After years of uncertainty about their final resting place, the remains of Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, and their children were found and laid to rest in St. Petersburg. The discovery of their remains brought closure to a chapter of Russian history that had remained unresolved for decades, and the royal family was finally laid to rest with the dignity and respect they had been denied during their lifetimes. Today, the legacy of the Romanovs is a part of Russia's national identity, though it is still a source of division. The family's tragic end serves as a poignant reminder of the destructive forces of revolution and the rapid collapse of an empire that had once been one of the largest in the world. For many Russians, the Romanovs remain a symbol of the lost grandeur of Russia's imperial past, while for others, they are a reminder of the failures that led to the revolution and the rise of the Soviet Union. As Russia continues to grapple with its complex history, the legacy of the Romanovs serves as both a symbol of nostalgia for some and a cautionary tale for others. Rasputin, too, remains an enduring figure in this narrative, with his connection to the Romanovs cementing his place in Russian history as both a mystical figure and a symbol of the monarchy's decline. The Romanovs' legacy, shaped by both reverence and criticism, continues to evolve, and their story remains one of the most fascinating and tragic chapters in Russian history. Part 15. Reflections on Rasputin's influence on Russian history. Rasputin's story is inseparable from the broader narrative of Russian history, as his life and death became symbolic of the downfall of the Romanov dynasty and the collapse of the Russian Empire. His influence, though short-lived, left an indelible mark on the course of history, highlighting the complexities of power, corruption, and the fragile nature of monarchy. His role in the Russian court is often portrayed as the embodiment of the excesses and decadence that led to the monarchy's eventual demise. Rasputin's power within the royal family, particularly his relationship with Tsarina Alexandra, was a critical element in the unraveling of the Romanov dynasty. His ability to gain the trust of the Tsarina, despite his lack of formal education and political experience, illustrated how the monarchy's internal problems were compounded by a reliance on individuals who were seen as outsiders and manipulators. Rasputin's influence on military and political decisions during World War I, especially in the face of Russian failures on the battlefield, made him a target for public outrage and contributed to the erosion of the monarchy's legitimacy. Despite the hostility toward him, Rasputin's impact on Russian politics was undeniable. His presence at the royal court, although controversial, helped solidify the monarchy's unpopularity, and his assassination only intensified the mystery surrounding his life. The rumors of Rasputin's supernatural abilities, coupled with his connections to the royal family, contributed to the creation of a legend that has persisted throughout history. Rasputin's legacy is often viewed through a dual lens. On one hand, he is seen as a political figure who helped hasten the fall of the Romanovs, while on the other hand, he is remembered as a mystic whose beliefs and actions captured imagination of the Russian people. His connection to the royal family, and particularly to Tsarina Alexandra, has ensured that his name is forever linked with the decline of the Russian monarchy. Some view Rasputin as a villain, a manipulative figure who preyed on the royal family's vulnerabilities, while others see him as a tragic and misunderstood mystic whose intentions were not fully understood in his time. The historical legacy of Rasputin has been shaped by both fact and fiction. His life story has been interpreted in numerous ways, with some focusing on his rise from a peasant to an influential figure at the heart of the Russian Empire, while others emphasize his mysticism and controversial lifestyle. What is undeniable is that Rasputin's influence was a catalyst in the broader narrative of Russian history, and his story is still analyzed and discussed today. His impact on Russian politics, culture, and even religion continues to intrigue historians, as well as popular culture, where he remains a figure of fascination and intrigue. In reflecting on Rasputin's role in Russian history, it is important to recognize the larger forces at play during his lifetime. The political instability of the Russian Empire, combined with the social and economic hardships faced by the people, created an environment ripe for revolutionary change. Rasputin, with all his mysticism and controversy, symbolized the flaws of the monarchy and the disconnect between the ruling family and the Russian populace. His influence on the Tsarina and consequently on the empire played a significant role in the unraveling of the Romanov dynasty. Ultimately, Rasputin's story is a reminder of the fragile nature of power and the unpredictability of history. His rise to prominence, his relationship with the royal family, and his tragic end all serve as a reflection of the complexities of leadership, the dangers of unchecked influence, and the consequences of political mismanagement. Rasputin's legacy, though clouded in myth and legend, will forever remain a critical part of Russian history. His influence, whether seen as positive or negative, is a testament to the forces that shape the course of history and the enigmatic individuals who leave their mark on it. Thanks for tuning in to Historical Legacies. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please like, subscribe, and share. Join us next time for more fascinating stories from the past.